The Pacific Crest Trail. Over 2,650 miles of wilderness threading deserts, forests, mountains, snowfields, and remote peaks from Mexico to Canada. A ribbon of trail where silence is deep and distance is long, where hikers test their bodies and minds, where nature is both guide and judge. In snow-shrouded Sierra passes and sun-blasted Southern California deserts, hikers have pushed forward into isolation for years, driven by calling, challenge, or escape. Some would finish. Others would never be seen again. How does someone disappear on a marked trail walked by thousands each year? What happens when the wilderness becomes more than scenery and turns into a force that cannot be outrun or understood? From remote canyons in Southern California to the high passes of the Sierra Nevada, the trail holds moments where lives changed in seconds. Join us through silent valleys and high passes, where each mile holds a story waiting to be uncovered, and let's unravel the secrets of the trail. Wendell Ray Eccles, 2006. Wendell Eccles was known across long-distance hiking circles by a name he wore lightly: No Way Ray. He had earned it not through bravado, but through years of steady miles, careful planning, and a quiet willingness to go where most people never did. At 61, Ray had already logged thousands of miles on America's long trails. He had served on the board of the American Long Distance Hiking Association West, written trail guides, and helped newer hikers learn how to move through wild places with respect. In the spring of 2006, Ray was once again on the Pacific Crest Trail. This time he was hiking with his wife, Alice Tulloch, his partner in both life and long walks. They were moving north through Southern California, where the trail cuts across dry ridges, oak woodland, and steep canyon systems that hide sudden drops behind calm scenery. By mid-May, they were hiking in the San Bernardino National Forest, near the Deep Creek area. It is a place shaped by erosion and water, where narrow trails cling to slopes above rocky ravines. Spring had settled in. The air was warm, but not yet heavy with summer heat. Snow was gone from the lower elevations, and the creeks ran steady but not violent. The trail was busy with through hikers beginning their long journey north. On May 13, 2006, Ray and Alice were hiking together as they had done many times before. They kept a short distance between them, close enough to speak, far enough to move at their own pace. The trail narrowed in places, winding around brush and rock outcroppings. In one of these sections, Ray moved slightly ahead. Alice followed about 20 yards behind him. She watched his back as he walked around a bend in the trail. For a moment, he was there. Then he was not. She expected to see him just ahead, waiting or adjusting his pack. Instead, the trail beyond the bend was empty. No sound, no movement. Alice called his name. At first, she assumed he had stopped just out of sight. When he did not answer, she called again, louder this time. The forest stayed still. Wind moved lightly through leaves. Somewhere below, water ran through the canyon. She walked forward, scanning the trail, then the slope beyond it. That was when she saw that the ground dropped away sharply, not far from where Ray had vanished. The canyon opened suddenly, steep and unforgiving. She shouted again. There was no reply. Panic moved quickly into her voice. Other hikers on the trail heard her and came running. One of them had a satellite phone, still uncommon in 2006. They called for help, while others tried to look down into the canyon, searching for any sign of movement. Search and rescue teams were deployed. They descended into the steep terrain below the trail. The slope was loose in places, layered with rock and dirt that could slide under weight. It did not take long for them to find Ray. He had fallen approximately 200 feet into the canyon. The fall was fatal. He was pronounced dead at the scene. There were no signs of foul play, no indication that he had been pushed or that anyone else had been involved. Everything pointed to a simple, devastating truth. He had likely stepped on unstable ground or lost his footing near the edge of the trail. One moment of imbalance had been enough.
The trail in that area is narrow. In some places, it offers little margin for error. There are sections where a misstep does not mean a stumble. It means open air.
Investigators documented the scene. They spoke with Alice and with the hikers who had heard her calls. They examined the trail where Ray had last been seen. There were no suspicious signs, no struggle, no conflicting accounts. The conclusion was clear. Ray had fallen. But clarity does not lessen impact. For Alice, the moment remained frozen in that quiet bend of trail where her husband disappeared from view. 20 yards. One curve in the path. The space between seeing someone and never seeing them again. News of Ray's death spread quickly through the hiking community. He was known not just for his miles, but for his presence. He had taught classes, written manuals, answered emails from strangers who wanted advice on how to walk far without breaking themselves. His death shook people because he represented preparation, caution, and experience. If someone like Ray could fall, then no one was immune. The Pacific Crest Trail Association later honored him in their memorial pages. They remembered him as a teacher, a guide, and a man who believed deeply in helping others reach the wild safely. Search teams recovered his body so that his family could lay him to rest. The canyon returned to silence. Wind passed through branches. Water continued to move through rock channels carved long before hikers named them. There were no lingering investigations, no unresolved evidence, no missing pieces. The case was closed because there was nothing to open. A man had fallen. That was the truth. And yet, even in cases with clear answers, the wilderness leaves behind a quieter question. How many steps had Ray taken in his life? How many narrow trails had held him safely? How many times had he walked edges like this one without incident? The Pacific Crest Trail stretches across deserts, forests, and mountains. In some places, it is wide and gentle. In others, it is a line cut into steep ground, asking hikers to trust their balance, their attention, and the ground beneath their boots. Ray trusted it, as he had many times before. On that May Day in 2006, the trail gave no warning. There was no storm, no darkness, no chaos, just a quiet moment where Earth did not hold. For those who hike after him, his story is not told as a legend or a mystery. It is told as a reminder. That experience reduces risk, but never removes it. That the wilderness does not announce its danger. It simply waits. Alice continued to hike after Ray's death, though never in the same way. Friends and fellow hikers supported her. The trail community carried his name forward in stories, in classes, in small moments when someone paused on a narrow ledge and chose their next step carefully. The canyon where Ray fell does not bear his name. There is no sign or marker. Nature does not record its own history. It only keeps moving. Somewhere along that quiet stretch of trail near Deep Creek, hikers still round the same bend. They see the same slope. They hear the same water below. Most never know what happened there. But the trail remembers in its own way, by offering the same question to every person who walks it. Will this step hold? Rika Morita and Kayokui Wang, 2017. By midsummer of 2017, the Sierra Nevada was still releasing winter. A heavy snow season had buried the high country for months. When temperatures rose, meltwater poured into every drainage. Rivers that were usually manageable by July surged with cold, fast current. Creek crossings that hikers expected to wade calmly became powerful obstacles. The Pacific Crest Trail climbed directly through this landscape. Granite walls rose on both sides of narrow valleys. Snow lingered in shaded bowls above 13,000 feet. Water roared through channels cut deep into rock. Rika Morita arrived in California from Osaka, Japan, at 32 years old. She had spent months preparing for the Pacific Crest Trail, studying maps and trail conditions, organizing her gear carefully. Other hikers described her as quiet, focused, and deliberate in her movements. She was not careless. She took her time. She began hiking north from the Mexican border in early summer, moving steadily through the desert and into the mountains. By late July, she reached the Sierra Nevada. On July 23, 2017, Rika approached the South Fork of the Kings River. That year, the river was far higher and faster than normal. Snowmelt from surrounding peaks fed the water continuously. The current was strong, the water cold enough to numb limbs quickly. Hikers ahead of her spoke about the crossing. Some planned to wait. Some searched for wider, calmer sections. Others crossed together in groups. Rika continued alone. She was last seen earlier that day near the riverbank. Those who passed her said she appeared calm, aware of the challenge ahead. Later that afternoon, hikers downstream noticed something caught in the water. At first, it was unclear what it was. Then, they recognized a body. It was Rika Morita. Search and rescue teams were called, but there was no search to conduct. She had already been found. Investigators determined she had drowned while attempting to cross the river. Her gear was located nearby, consistent with a crossing attempt. There were no signs of violence, no indication of another person's involvement. The conclusion was accidental drowning. 7 days later, another hiker would die in similar conditions farther north. Kaokwi Wang, known on the trail as Tree, had traveled from China to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. She was in her 20s and had prepared carefully for the journey. Friends described her as thoughtful and determined, moving with steady purpose. By late July, she had reached Yosemite National Park, where the trail follows long valleys carved by glaciers and fed by high-altitude snowmelt. Carrick Canyon stretches for miles through meadow and forest. Rancheria Creek runs through its center. In most summers, it is shallow enough to cross with caution. In 2017, it was swollen and fast. On July 30, 2017, Kaokwi attempted to cross Rancheria Creek. She was alone at the crossing. At some point during the attempt, she was swept into the current. When she failed to appear later that day, concern spread among hikers. Her last known location near the creek was reported. Search efforts began along the waterway. The following day, her body was found downstream, caught near rocks and debris. Like Rika, Kaokwi had drowned. Investigators again found no signs of foul play. The terrain and water conditions pointed clearly to a river crossing accident. Two women from opposite sides of the world, hiking the same trail within the same week, had lost their lives to the same force. The Pacific Crest Trail Association later acknowledged both deaths, emphasizing the unusually dangerous water conditions in the Sierra Nevada that year. Heavy snowpack had created hazardous crossings long into summer. Warnings had been shared among hikers. Some altered their routes. Some waited weeks. Some turned back. Others continued forward. In both cases, search teams documented the scenes and closed the investigations quickly. There were no unanswered forensic questions. The rivers themselves were the cause. But the exact moments remain unknown. No one saw Rika lose her footing in the Kings River. No one witnessed Kayokwi being pulled under in Rancheria Creek. It is unclear whether either hesitated, whether they tested the water, whether the current surprised them or gradually overwhelmed them. Cold mountain water can shock the body instantly. Strong current can knock even experienced hikers off balance. Once submerged, heavy packs can drag a person down. In high snow years, rivers rise earlier in the day as sunlight melts snow above. A crossing that seems manageable in the morning can become dangerous by afternoon. Both women were crossing during a season when the Sierra Nevada was still adjusting from winter to summer. Rika's body was returned to Japan. Kayokwi's family received the same call days later. The hiking community mourned quietly. For many hikers who passed through the Sierra that year, the crossings became moments of tension. People waited for groups. They held hands. They looked for safer spots. Some chose not to cross at all. But for Rika Morita and Kayokwi Wang, the trail ended in water. Their cases are recorded as accidents. Yet the mountains offer no explanation for why one person crosses safely while another does not. Thousands of hikers crossed the same rivers in 2017. Most survived. 2 did not. The Sierra Nevada remains a place of beauty and danger. Snow still melts into rivers each year. Water still carves stone. Hikers still step into moving current, judging depth, speed, and strength. The trail does not change its course for loss. It continues forward. And in the cold rivers of the high mountains, the answers to those final moments remain unseen. Trevor Microsoft Leher, 2020. In late March of 2020, the Pacific Crest Trail in Southern California was in transition. Below, the desert still held heat from the day. Above, in the San Jacinto Mountains, winter had not yet released its grip. Snow lingered in shaded gullies. Ice formed where meltwater crossed stone. The trail climbed from sun into cold without much warning. Trevor Leher was 22 years old. On trail, he was known as Microsoft. He had chosen the Pacific Crest Trail, as many young hikers do, drawn by distance, by challenge, by the idea of living for months with only what he could carry. He began his hike at the southern terminus near Campo earlier in March, moving north through the open desert and into higher country. By the time he reached the San Jacinto Range, weather reports warned of lingering snow and ice. Many hikers were cautious. Some skipped sections. Others waited for safer conditions. But the trail itself remained open, and hikers continued to pass through, judging risk for themselves. On March 27, 2020, Trevor was hiking near Apache Peak, around mile 169.5 of the Pacific Crest Trail. This stretch of trail is narrow in places, cut into steep slopes of rock and dirt. When snow melts during the day and freezes again at night, thin sheets of ice can form, sometimes hidden beneath light dustings of snow. That day, the air was cold at higher elevation. Shadows held ice long after sunlight touched the ridges. Conditions were dangerous but not unusual for early-season hikers. Trevor was alone. Other hikers later reported seeing him earlier that day. He was moving steadily, not rushing, not lagging behind. Like many hikers, he was balancing the desire to make miles with the need to stay safe in changing terrain. At some point near Apache Peak, Trevor slipped. Investigators later determined that he lost his footing on an icy section of trail.
There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of another person. The terrain dropped steeply below the trail. He fell a significant distance down the slope. The fall was fatal. There were no immediate witnesses to the moment itself. Other hikers became concerned when he did not arrive at expected points along the trail. Search efforts began after his absence was noticed and reported. Search and rescue teams responded, navigating the same dangerous terrain that had taken his life. They located Trevor's body below the trail near the area where he was believed to have slipped. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators examined his gear and the surrounding area. Reports noted that he was not wearing microspikes, small metal traction devices that hikers often use in icy conditions. Many hikers in that section at that time were using them. Others were not. Whether traction would have prevented the fall cannot be known for certain. What is known is that the trail was icy, narrow, and unforgiving. The official conclusion was accidental death due to a fall. There was no evidence of foul play, no indication that anyone else had been involved. The mountain itself was the only force acting that day. News of Trevor's death spread quickly through the hiking community. The name Microsoft appeared in trail journals, on forums, and in quiet conversations between hikers who were now more cautious with every step on snow. In March of 2020, the world beyond the trail was beginning to change rapidly due to the spread of COVID-19. Travel restrictions and uncertainty were growing. Many hikers would soon leave the trail early because of the pandemic. Trevor never had that chance. Search and rescue teams completed their recovery efforts. Authorities closed the case as an accident. There was no extended investigation because there was nothing to investigate beyond the conditions of the trail and the mechanics of a fall. But in the wilderness, even clear answers leave quiet questions. How long had Trevor been watching his footing before he slipped? Did he see the ice? Did he try to step around it? Did it give way beneath him without warning? No one knows. The Pacific Crest Trail near Apache Peak remains narrow. In spring, snow still melts and refreezes. Shadows still hold ice even when the sun is bright. Hikers still pass through, sometimes with traction, sometimes without, always making small decisions that matter more than they seem. Trevor's family was notified. His body was returned home. People who had met him on trail remembered his quiet manner, his focus, the way he spoke about the miles ahead. The place where he fell has no marker. There is no sign to say what happened there. The trail does not record its losses. It only offers the same path to those who come after. Today, Trevor Microsoft Lahare's death is listed among the known fatalities on the Pacific Crest Trail. It is considered closed, resolved, and understood in official terms. But for hikers who pass that section in early spring, the understanding is different. It is felt in the way they test the ground with their poles, in the way they slow down when ice glints faintly under thin snow, in the way silence grows when someone mentions his name. In the mountains, risk is not dramatic. It does not shout. It waits quietly in shade and stone. On March 27, 2020, the trail offered no warning, only a surface that did not hold. And after that, only silence. David O'Sullivan, 2017, still missing. In March of 2017, the southern stretch of the Pacific Crest Trail looked calm from a distance. Low mountains rolled through scrub and pine. Desert wind moved through grass and brush. Spring had not fully arrived, but winter had begun to loosen its hold. David O'Sullivan arrived at the southern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail near Campo, California, on March 22, 2017. He was beginning a northbound hike that would take him across deserts,
mountains, and forests, if he finished. He was not loud or flashy. Other hikers described him as quiet, thoughtful, and focused on the trail ahead. He carried light gear. He preferred efficiency over comfort. Like many hikers starting early in the season, he knew the conditions would be unpredictable. Snow still covered parts of the mountains ahead. Storms could move in quickly, but he had prepared for this, at least as much as anyone can. In the first days, David moved steadily. He passed through dry hills and open valleys where the trail stretches under wide sky. Nights were cold. Days were mild. Other hikers remembered seeing him in the early section near Mount Laguna, a common stop for resupply and rest. He spoke with a few people. He did not linger. By late March, weather in Southern California turned unstable. Rain moved through the mountains. Winds picked up. Some hikers talked about storms that flattened tents and soaked gear. Snow fell at higher elevations. Trail conditions changed quickly. David continued north. The last confirmed sightings of him place him somewhere in the southern San Jacinto region, roughly 180 miles into the trail. This area is known for steep terrain, forested slopes, and unpredictable weather in early spring. Snow can appear suddenly. Trails can disappear beneath it. After that, there were no more confirmed sightings. When David failed to check in with family and friends, concern grew. At first, people assumed delays. The trail can slow anyone. Weather, injuries, or detours can push schedules off by days or even weeks. But as time passed, worry deepened. Search efforts began in late April and early May. Volunteer searchers, local authorities, and hikers joined the effort. They focused on the region where David had last been seen. Forested slopes, steep ravines, snow-covered sections of trail. They searched on foot, by dog teams, and in some cases with aerial assistance. They found nothing. No pack, no shelter, no tracks that could be confidently tied to him. Snow in some areas had melted and refrozen multiple times, erasing signs. Rain had washed away footprints. In other places, steep terrain made searching slow and dangerous. Search teams expanded the area. They checked common side trails, creek beds, and areas where hikers sometimes leave the main trail. They followed reports from people who thought they might have seen him, though none of these sightings could be confirmed. Weeks passed, then months. With time, the official search was scaled back. There were no new leads, no physical evidence, nothing that could explain where David had gone. Investigators considered several possibilities, though none could be proven. One possibility was an accidental fall. In the San Jacinto region, the trail passes near steep slopes and rocky drop-offs. Snow and ice can make footing unstable. A fall in the wrong place could carry someone far from the trail, into terrain difficult to search. Another possibility was exposure. Cold, wet conditions can drain the body quickly. Hypothermia can disorient even experienced hikers. A person may leave the trail without realizing it, seeking shelter that is not there. There was also the possibility of a medical emergency. Heart problems, severe dehydration, or sudden illness can strike without warning. Alone on the trail, there is no one to call for help. There has never been any evidence of foul play. No sign of violence. No witness to suggest another person was involved. But in the absence of evidence, nothing can be fully ruled out. What makes David's case different from many trail accidents is the lack of closure. In most fatal incidents, a body is found. The cause is determined. The story, while tragic, has an ending. David O'Sullivan's story does not. Years have passed. Hikers still walk the same miles where he was last seen. Snow still falls in early spring. Rain still erases tracks. Wind still moves through pine and chaparral. Every season, people ask the same questions. Where did he leave the trail? Did he fall somewhere no one has looked? Did weather hide him in a place now unreachable? Did he become lost and move farther away than anyone expects? There are no answers. His case remains officially unsolved. He is still listed as missing. No remains have been located. No gear has been recovered. No confirmed sighting has come after those early days in 2017. David's family continues to wait without certainty. They have no grave to visit, no final report to read, only a line on a map that ends too soon. In the hiking community, his name appears quietly in conversations about risk, about early season snow, about how quickly things can change. But on the trail itself, there is no sign of him, no marker, no plaque. The wilderness does not record who passes through. It only keeps what it takes. Somewhere in Southern California, between dry ridges and cold forests, David O'Sullivan stepped forward on a path that thousands walk every year. And then he was gone. The trail did not explain itself. It still does not. Robert Budinsky, 2024, still missing. In April of 2024, the mountains above Idlewild, California, were quiet in the way early spring often is. Snow still clung to shaded slopes. Pine needles lay damp on the ground from melting frost. The air shifted between cool mornings and mild afternoons, never fully committing to either season. Robert Budinsky came to this place with experience. He was known on the Pacific Crest Trail as Ambassador. This was not his first attempt at the trail. It was his third. He had walked long distances before, learned from setbacks, and returned again with the same intention many hikers carry to finish what they once began. Friends described him as steady and thoughtful. He paid attention to conditions. He talked about safety. He did not chase miles for the sake of pride. In early April, he was hiking north from the desert, moving toward the San Jacinto Range, where the trail begins to climb into colder and more complicated terrain. By mid-April, snow and ice still covered dangerous sections of the official Pacific Crest Trail near Idlewild. Rangers and trail organizations warned hikers that some parts were risky. Many chose alternate routes to avoid steep, icy traverses. Robert was one of them. On April 15, 2024, he arranged to be dropped off near Black Mountain Road outside Idlewild. A trail angel, someone who helps hikers with rides or supplies, drove him there. He planned to take a safer alternate path around a known hazardous section of the trail and rejoin the Pacific Crest Trail farther north. That morning, he seemed normal, calm, focused. He had food. He had his pack. He had a plan. He stepped out of the vehicle and began walking. That was the last confirmed sighting of Robert Budinsky. When he did not appear where he was expected to rejoin the trail, people began to worry. At first, there were reasonable explanations. Delays happen. Trails are slow. Weather changes plans. But days passed with no word. Friends and family contacted authorities. Search and rescue teams from Riverside County began looking in the area around Black Mountain Road and nearby trails. Volunteers joined them. They searched along the road, down ravines, across forested slopes, and through brush thick enough to hide a person only a few feet away. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew overhead. Searchers walked lines through rough terrain, scanning for gear, footprints, broken branches, anything that might show where Robert had gone. They found nothing. The area where he disappeared is not empty. It is crossed by dirt roads, hiking paths, and animal trails. But it is also steep in places, thick with chaparral, and broken by hidden drops and narrow canyons. In early spring, snow and rain can erase tracks within hours. Search efforts continued for weeks. Tips came in from people who thought they might have seen him. Some reports placed him miles away. None could be confirmed. There was no sign of his pack, no discarded clothing, no campsite, no message. Investigators considered multiple possibilities. He may have fallen, even off the main trail. Terrain near Idlewild includes steep slopes and loose ground. A fall in the wrong place could carry someone into brush or ravines difficult to search. He may have become disoriented. Trails in the area intersect and fade. Fog and snow can hide landmarks. A wrong turn can lead miles away from where someone meant to go. There is also the possibility of a medical emergency. Alone in the mountains, sudden illness or injury leaves no one to call for help. Authorities have said there is no evidence of foul play, no signs of a struggle, no reports of suspicious activity tied directly to his disappearance. But without evidence, no explanation can be confirmed. As time passed, official search efforts were reduced, not because the case was solved, but because there were no new leads and no specific areas left that had not already been searched. Robert Budinsky is still listed as missing. His family has spoken publicly, asking hikers and locals to stay alert. They continue to wait for any word that could explain where he went. In the hiking community, his disappearance has become a quiet warning about early season conditions, about alternate routes that feel safer but are still wild, about how a person can vanish even when following a plan. The mountains near Idlewild have not changed. Snow still melts in spring, trails still wind through pine and rock, roads still cut through forest before fading back into dirt. Somewhere between where Robert stepped out of a car on April 15, 2024, and where he meant to rejoin the Pacific Crest Trail, something happened. What that something was is not known. He did not leave a note. He did not send a final message. He did not appear again. Search teams have said that if his remains are ever found, they may finally understand what went wrong. Until then, his case remains open. For now, Robert Budinsky exists only in memory, in photographs, in stories told by hikers who met him briefly, and in the quiet space on a map where his path stopped. Every year, hikers pass near the place where he was last seen. Most do not know his name. Some do. They walk through the same forests. They step over the same routes. They hear the same wind in the trees. And somewhere in that wide, silent space, a question remains. Where did Robert Budinsky go? Unseen killers, hypoxia and altitude. Maddie McGee, 2022. High in California's Sierra Nevada, the Pacific Crest Trail climbs into thin air. Granite walls rise in pale slabs. Snow lingers in shaded bowls even when valleys below have turned green. Wind moves without obstruction. Sound carries far, then disappears. Forester Pass stands among the highest points on the trail in California, rising above 13,000 feet. In early summer, it is a place of contrast. Bright sun on snow, cold wind on warm skin, breath that feels shorter than it should. In 2022, the Sierra saw a heavy winter snowpack. When spring gave way to early summer, the mountains released that snow slowly. High passes stayed cold. Nights dropped below freezing. Days could feel warm in the sun, but turn sharp in the shade. Maddie McGee was 23 years old. She was an experienced hiker, comfortable with long miles and high terrain. She had trained, prepared, and understood that altitude changes the body. She joined the Pacific Crest Trail seeking distance and quiet, like many before her. By late spring, she had reached the Sierra Nevada. Other hikers described her as capable and calm. She did not rush. She paid attention to conditions. She moved with purpose. In late May of 2022, Maddie approached Forester Pass from the south. The climb is long and steady, winding upward through alpine stone and lingering snowfields. At that elevation, oxygen is thinner. Every step asks more from the lungs. Even strong hikers feel it. Weather reports for that period describe cold nights, clear days, and strong winds near the pass. Snow remained in patches across the trail. Some hikers used traction. Others moved carefully around icy sections. Maddie continued upward. People who saw her earlier that day said she looked tired, but not distressed. Fatigue at that elevation is normal. Shortness of breath is expected, but sometimes the body reacts in ways that are not. As altitude increases, oxygen pressure decreases. For most people, the body adapts slowly. For some, it does not. One dangerous condition is high-altitude pulmonary edema, often called HAPE. It causes fluid to build in the lungs, making breathing increasingly difficult. It can develop quickly. It can become fatal if not treated. At some point near the top of Forester Pass, Maddie collapsed. There were hikers on the mountain that day, but distances are large in high country. When she was found, she was unresponsive. Rescue efforts began quickly. Other hikers tried to help. Emergency services were contacted, but in places like Forester Pass, help is far away. Helicopters depend on weather and visibility. Ground rescue means climbing the same steep terrain that injured the person. Maddie was pronounced dead near the pass. There were no signs of trauma, no evidence of a fall from height, no injuries that suggested impact with rock or ice. What remained were symptoms consistent with severe altitude illness. Later reports and trail community summaries indicated that her death was likely caused by hypoxia related to altitude, possibly high-altitude pulmonary edema. This diagnosis was based on the absence of physical trauma and the environmental conditions at the time. There was no indication of foul play, no evidence that another person was involved. The mountain itself had taken her breath. Search and rescue teams recovered her body and transported her down from the pass. Authorities reviewed the circumstances. The case was not treated as a criminal investigation. It was considered a medical tragedy in extreme terrain. But medical tragedies in the wilderness leave questions that science cannot always answer. Why did Maddie's body fail where others did not? Why did symptoms appear when she had handled altitude before? Why did it happen that day and not another? Some people are more vulnerable to altitude illness than others. Past performance does not guarantee future safety. Acclimatization can fail. Bodies change. Conditions change. But no test can predict exactly when or if altitude will become deadly. Maddie's family was notified. The news traveled quickly through hiking communities. Messages of respect and remembrance filled online pages. People who had met her only briefly wrote about her kindness and focus. Forester Pass did not change after her death. Snow still melts there in summer. Wind still cuts across stone. Hikers still climb toward thin air, counting steps, watching clouds, listening to their breathing. Her case is listed among known fatalities on the Pacific Crest Trail. it is considered closed. The cause is recorded as a medical emergency related to altitude.
Yet even with a cause, there is no certainty.
There is no moment that can be pointed to and named. No single step. No clear warning that said, "Stop now." Altitude illness does not always announce itself loudly. It can begin as mild fatigue, a slight headache, short breath, symptoms that are common at high elevation and easy to ignore. At 13,000 feet, the line between normal and dangerous is thin. Hikers who pass through Forester Pass now sometimes speak her name quietly. Some know her story. Some do not. Some feel fear. Some feel confidence. But the air remains the same for all of them. Thin, unforgiving, invisible. Maddie McGee went to the mountains with preparation and experience. She did not chase recklessness. She walked into a place where the danger cannot be seen, only felt too late. Her death reminds hikers that not all threats have shape. Some are carried in the air. Some move through the blood. Some arrive without sound. Even today, no one can say exactly what she felt in her final moments. Whether she knew what was happening, whether she understood that the mountain itself was taking her breath. The trail continues. People still climb toward Forester Pass under blue sky and white snow. They breathe. They hope it is enough. From one silent valley to another, these are stories of the Pacific Crest Trail, when the wilderness becomes unforgiving and the answers fade into the trees and snow. Some tragedies are clear: a slip on ice, a misjudged river crossing, factual events with clean narratives. Others remain clouded by absence and uncertainty, like the paths of David O'Sullivan and Robert Budinsky, where no footprints beyond last sighting mark the ground. The Pacific Crest Trail is a journey through inhospitable beauty. Every mile is a choice. Every switchback, a negotiation with weather, terrain, and one's own limits. Sometimes, the wilderness keeps its stories, and the world does not receive closure. Here, where wind whistles through pines and snow drains into quiet creeks, the trail continues, indifferent to endings, telling only what can be learned, and leaving open what cannot.